Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. As you can see, the final score for this game was a bloodbath by Michie, 91-28. And the reason for that was still turnovers. Because yeah, Michie wins 91-28. They had two more first downs, 22-20. More offensive yards. A lot more rushing yards. But Boston College did do more passing attempts. Kinda doesn't help the fact that they were behind for the entirety of the game. So yeah, Michie had a nice 69 rushing attempts for 243 yards, and only went 16 for 33 passing, but got 3 passing touchdowns for 291 yards. Meanwhile, Boston College ran the ball 33 times, only got 83 yards, did 41 passing attempts for 88 yards. They also got 3 touchdowns out of the ordeal for 432 yards. But Boston College got sacked 8 times compared to only 6 by Michie. But Boston College did convert on third downs, which normally you need to convert third downs to win. But I'll show you in a bit on why that wasn't exactly the case for Boston College being able to win, even though Michie went 6 for 23 on third downs. Both of them didn't convert a single third down in the game, although for Boston College I can kind of understand them going for it. You're down by a lot of points. You gotta try to catch up as much as you can. But what can you really do in that situation? The other team went for it for 2. Michie kicked 4 field goals in the red zone. I admire that they were able to walk away with points. But throughout the weeks, you need to kind of score touchdowns instead of field goals. Because a lot of teams aren't going to be like Boston College and just lay over dead for you and just let you kick the field goals in the red zone. Meanwhile, Boston College did get the 1 touchdown in the red zone, but they couldn't convert anymore. But you have 15 turnovers for Boston College. That's a bit of an issue if you're trying to win a game. I mean, Michie lost another fumble, but he didn't lose the fumble. But 12 interceptions by Boston College. 12. I mean, at that point, I'm just sticking to running the ball, because if I'm giving free handouts to the other team, why am I going to just choose to let the team pass all the time, knowing that there's a chance for it to be picked off? Like, seeing that there are 88 attempts, that means a little less than 1 out of every 7 passes that left the quarterback's hand went to a defender. That's a crazy stat to think of. Michie got more punt return yards, 64 to 38 for Boston College, but Boston College gains the edge and kickoff return yards in 148 to 99. So Boston wins the total yard battle by just 4. But they had to punt the ball 12 times compared to 8 for Michie. Michie had all their penalties in the first half, and Boston College, who had no penalties heading into halftime, come out of this with 4 penalties for 35 yards, and Michie won the time of possession. Now, individual stats. John Carroll, who came in after Nunez threw his 4 picks, went 21 for 45 for 281 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's a good stat line so far. I mean, 21 for 45. I mean, that's under 50%. 78.2 quarterback rating. But 2 touchdowns and nearly 300 yards. What could possibly have gone wrong? Oh, I don't know. How about 8 interceptions? You know, that's going to kind of bring your quarterback rating down. Plus, he's a redshirt junior. Some NFL teams could be looking at him and being like, hey, we might want this guy to lead our offense. I mean, look at that. 21 for 45, 281 yards, 2 interceptions, 2 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. We're a run-heavy offense, alright? We are? Okay, he can just be a game manager for us then. Average 6.2 yards per attempt compared to 3.5 for Nunez. Both got sacked 4 times, but his longest pass went for an 81-yard touchdown, I believe. Meanwhile, for Michie, Brent Sanders has a 266.2 passer rating, but passer ratings work a lot differently in college than they do in the pros, because in the pros, your highest can be 158.3. Don't ask me why it's at a 0.3 for the end. I'm not the one who made up the formula. But before Brent got injured, he went 5 for 7, 123 yards, had a touchdown, completed 71% of his passes, didn't get sacked, and his longest throw was 54 yards, which is the longest throw for any of these quarterbacks. Meanwhile, the backup, Tony Morris, went 5 for 12, 439 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions for a 144 quarterback rating. Got sacked 3 times. Willie Borley, the third string quarterback, had to step in because Tony got injured a little bit. Tony was injured at halftime in this game. So it kind of made me think Boston College was kind of out for blood, because it's like essentially, hey, we're going to go ahead and injure your starting quarterback and your backup quarterback. And yet they were still able to beat them with the third string quarterback. Although he went 6 for 14 for 29 yards. Didn't throw a touchdown, but didn't throw an interception either. As we saw, he got sacked 3 times. So a quarterback rating of 60.3. Ryan Hall had 20 attempts for 119 yards and a touchdown. And he also made himself well known in the receiving game as well. 4 catches, 87 yards, and a touchdown, which was the 81-yard touchdown catch. So yeah, Ryan Hall is the offensive MVP for Boston College, I would say. Hey. Meanwhile, James White didn't get a single yard on 2 attempts. James George didn't get trusted with a carry after halftime. John Carroll had 4 attempts for negative 27 yards, but all 4 of those attempts were sacks. So that thing. Meanwhile, Brendan Sims had 14 carries, 165 yards, 2 touchdowns, and he fumbled the ball once, so did Sean Smith. Brent Sanders fumbled the ball once, and Tony Morris fumbled the ball twice. Meanwhile, Sean Smith had 18 carries for 77 yards. Willie Borley had 14 attempts for 20 yards. Jay Hubbard had 3 attempts for 8 yards. Anthony Scott had 2 carries, but neither of them went forward. Brent Sanders had 4 carries for negative 7 yards. Tony Morris had 14 attempts for negative 8 yards. And that's the rushing stats for Michie. Receiving for Boston College, not blocking yet. Zach Butler had 10 catches for 112 yards and a touchdown. Steve Bryant had 8 catches for 37 yards. Eric Johnson had 7 catches for 82. Nick Young had 6 catches for 63 yards. As we just discussed, Ryan Hall had 4 catches for 87 yards. That means his other 3 catches combined for a total of 6 yards. Because he had that long of 81. So his other 3 catches went for a total of 6 yards. Paul Harrell had 2 catches for 13 yards. Kinley Cock had 1 catch for 3 yards. Thomas Smith had a catch for 20 yards. Scott Dickerson had a catch for 9 yards. James George was able to get something positive at least. A catch for 6 yards. So he dropped a pass. Thomas Smith dropped 2. Ryan Hall dropped a pass. Nick Young dropped 2 passes. Eric Johnson dropped 2 passes. And that's it for the dropped passes for Boston College. Meanwhile, for Michie, you had Michael Sapp lead the way with 7 catches, 158 yards, 2 touchdowns, and not a single drop. Actually, for Michie, the only guys to drop passes were Eric Hardy, a freshman, and Sean Tepper, who was targeted. He was targeted a couple times, but he dropped some passes. Next guy on the list is Greg Mackey, 3 catches for 66 yards and a touchdown. Sean Smith had 2 catches but didn't go anywhere with his catches. Austin Grimes had 17. Number 17 had 2 catches for 9 yards. Louis White had a catch for 30 yards. Eric Hardy had a catch for 8 yards, and that's it. As we said, Tip only was on there for drop passes. Troy Baker, Nick Garrison, and Jeremy Carlton. And Brian Hawkins all allowed a sack. While Brian Hawkins also led for pancakes. Marvin Holland, Clint O'Connor, and Josh Bolden all led in pancakes for Michie. Bud Matt Campbell allowed 2 sacks. Brendan Sims, Mark Crenshaw, and Marvin Holland all allowed sacks. And defensively, seeing all these players, like on one hand it's good to see like all these players come in, but you see you got a couple tight ends here, your halfback, wide receivers. Like you have some of your offensive players in here, and that's because of throwing 12 interceptions in total. Kind of tells you that hey, maybe we should probably kind of go into more of a run-based offense. But Scott Gibson had 16 tackles, 6 of them for a loss, forced 2 fumbles and recovered them both. But yeah, they did not have a single defensive touchdown, so there's that right there. Next you have Scott Dickerson, who had 13 tackles, and an interception, along with a pass deflection and a forced fumble. Then you have Jason Pryor, who had 11 tackles, Well, technically did catch him. He just caught the player. 11 tackles, 1 for a loss. He also forced a fumble as well. Then you got Trey Simmons with 10 tackles, 4 of them for a loss, 2 sacks, an interception, deflected a pass, and recovered a fumble as well. So he might be Boston College's defensive MVP for just essentially doing it all for the team. Keith Scott had 9 tackles, 6 for a loss. He also had 2 sacks. And that's about it for his defensive production. Anton Neal had 8 tackles, 2 for a loss, a sack, deflected 2 passes, and that's his contribution. Michael Merrick had 8 tackles and 3 pass deflections. And did he recover a fumble? Nope. Michael Quinn had 7 tackles, 4 of them for a loss, and he forced a fumble. Zach Wilson had 5 tackles, 1 for a loss, and a sack. Devin Thomas had 4 tackles, 2 for a loss, picked off a pass, deflected 2 more, and that's it. Meanwhile, Zach Butler, who was their leading receiver? Yeah. Leading receiver was 10 catches, also had 3 tackles. Leon McCoy had 3 tackles himself. Corey Odom had 3 tackles. Eric Johnson had 2 tackles. Scott Everett had 2 tackles, including 1 for a loss. Lonnie Robinson had 2 tackles as well, also 1 for a loss. Nick Young had 2 tackles. Mark Vogel had 2 tackles. Dan Davis had a tackle. Ryan Hall had a tackle. Steve Bryan had a tackle. And Paul Farrell had a tackle. Now, Mickey, nobody hit double-digit tackles, but Roger Todd, 7 tackles, 3 picks, 146 yards, 3 pass deflections, and 2 defensive touchdowns. So he took a couple pick sixes to the house. Matt Prince also had a touchdown, and Gutierrez had a touchdown, and Michael Peterson had a touchdown himself. So, Trenton Lane, figured a team with the Devil's nickname would have 666 here, but I digress on that for the jokes. Trenton Lane had 6 tackles, 2 of them for a loss, a sack, and he forced a fumble as well. Nick Brown had 6 tackles, for 3 of them for a loss, and he had a pick, and 3 pass deflections as well. Jamal Spurlock had 6 tackles and forced a fumble. Recovered a fumble too for only 2 yards. And Casey Fagan had 5 tackles, 1 for a loss, including a sack. But that's it for his production. Andy Gutierrez had 5 tackles and a 100-yard pick 6. He also deflected 2 more passes. Michael Pearson had 4 tackles, including the 62-yard pick 6, and he had 2 pass deflections himself. Rufus Irving had 4 tackles, 1 for a loss, which was a sack, and 2 pass deflections. So yeah, a lot of different people just kind of stepping up a bit for Mickey. Austin Bowman, you had 4 tackles and a pass deflection. Brad Bernard had 4 tackles, including 1 for a loss, which was a sack, 2 pass deflections, and he recovered a fumble. Randy Cronin had 3 tackles, 2 picks, but 1 went backwards. And the other one, he didn't even gain a yard. But hey, getting 2 picks ain't no laughing matter, though. And pass deflection, and that's all his stats for the game. Ken Anthony had 3 tackles, 2 for a loss, including a sack. Adam Campbell only had 3 tackles. Robert Hull had 3 tackles and an interception. Zach Booker had 3 tackles, 2 for a loss, a sack, and that's about it. His stat line looks the exact same as Anthony's. Matt Prince, 3 tackles, a 44-yard pick 6, and a pass deflection. Now, I'm guessing these were probably also special teams tackles. So, Greg Mackey had 2 tackles. Louis White had 2 tackles. Actually, Greg Mackey played defense in this game? Wow, I just realized that now. He had 2 picks. Sure, the picks didn't really go anywhere. One went for a yard, and the other one probably went backwards a yard, but still. I mean, hey, who better to catch interceptions than a wide receiver? Used to catching the ball. Louis White's got 2 tackles. Jeff O'Neal had 2 tackles, both of them for a loss, both of them being sacks, and he forced 2 fumbles. So he's just the 2-man today. Brandon Demps had a tackle for a loss. George Key. Okay. I'm guessing with how many players that were probably getting tired, they had to put in some of the offensive players as well. And like some of the, mainly like the 3rd string offensive guys. Because here's George Key with a tackle. Kevin Steltz with a tackle and a pass deflection. David Brown with a tackle. Anything else? Nope. Trey Poole had a tackle. Michael Sapp had a tackle and a pass deflection. Mark Johnson recovered a fumble and got a tackle for a loss. Brandon Sims had a tackle. Ryan Johnson only had a tackle, and it was for a loss. Why in the world is Tony Morris on here? Oh my God. The backup quarterback deflected a pass. Wow. You know, this game got so crazy. The backup quarterback, who was replacing the starting quarterback, got a pass deflection. Neither kicker attempted a field goal, so that would be Bruce Ramirez's job. He was able to get the 4 extra points, though. Meanwhile, John Carter got 5 kickoffs, none of them went for a touchback. Meanwhile, Scott Gray had 17 kickoffs, 10 of them for touchbacks. 3 for 3 from field goals from 50 yards. 1 for 1 on field goals from 40 to 49, 30 39, 2 for 2. Made one from like extra point distance as well. And 10 for 10 on the extra points as well. 7 for 7, so he scored 31 of Mickey's points. Andy Vincent, his longest punt was 55 yards still. Had that one inside the 20, but didn't have a single touchback. Meanwhile, Andre Walker, his longest punt improved to 62 yards from halftime, but had four touchbacks. Justin Berry had 68 yards on 3 returns, and Frank Purcell had 4 returns for 80 yards. Meanwhile, a little bit everybody returning kicks. You had Michael Sapp take 2 for 44 yards, Austin Grimes take 1 for 19, and you had Andy Gutierrez take 2 for 36. Meanwhile, punt return, you had Justin Berry take 3 for 38 yards. And again, a little bit of everybody chipping in. You had Sean Temper get 4 for 27. You had Austin Grimes do 6 for 32. And you had Greg Mackey do 1 for 5. And your box score from the second half onward. Yeah, not that much scoring by Mickey in the third quarter. Just a couple field goals by Gray. 52-yarder and a 41-yarder. Boston College got one final score and a 32-yard pass from Carroll to Butler. Then, 34-yard pass from Morris to Sapp. 51-yard field goal by Gray. 53-yard pass from Morris to Sapp. And 20-yard field goal by Gray. So, that is this game. Let me make sure the sound is muted. Okay, it is. So that way, if any fight songs start playing, I won't end up getting copyright hit. Let's see, will it actually load? Probably done up the fact that I've let this game kind of linger on for a couple of days. Oh, it actually loaded. So I will go ahead and get to work. Yes, save the changes. And I will go ahead and get to work on the pregame for this game right here between McNairy Central and Louisville, the game that I will be using. So I will see you all next time.